As the Girls Brigade, we want to make sure that we're always giving the girls that we work with some biblical knowledge to increase their love of the Bible, to see the relevance of Jesus in their everyday lives. And we want to do the same with this topic, sex and relationships. Now, we know that at the moment, obviously in churches, we as a church, there are things that we agree on, there are things that we disagree on. And so in this section now, I'm just going to be kind of opening up with us and equipping us with some thinking around biblical sex and relationships. So I'm not going to cover everything, and really keen that we honour the churches that we're part of as well in this. But what I'd love to do is just zone in on a fantastic passage where Jesus talks about sex and what God created sex for. Now, Jesus hardly ever talks about sex. Like, he talks way more about power, the abuse of power, about money, about hospitality. But there's a couple of times where he talks about sex, and so we sort of take note of that, don't we? And there's one fantastic passage in Mark chapter 10. And at the weekend I was speaking with a bunch of youth leaders and teenage girls in Liverpool, and in a seminar about sex, and the girls all wrote down their questions. And even in this very sexualised culture where girls are aware of pornography around them, and they have questions about masturbation, about homosexuality and same-sex attraction and all that kind of stuff, the key question that came up for this group of girls aged 11 to 18 was, why do we save sex for marriage? It just feels that in today's culture that seems so bizarre and at odds with the whole of culture. And for girls who want to live a Christian way when it comes to relationships, that just feels like totally nuts to their friends. And so I zoned in on this passage in Mark chapter 10. So it's Mark chapter 10, where Jesus is asked questions about divorce, but he doesn't actually answer that. He is asked, Jesus, this woman, she was married, then her husband died, so she gets remarried, and then that husband dies, and then she gets married again, so who is she married to in heaven? And Jesus doesn't really answer that question. He just takes the Pharisees back to the beginning, to Genesis, and he says this: at the beginning of creation, in verse 5, God made them male and female, and you'll know this line from weddings. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become lebasar ached, one flesh. So whatever God has joined together, let man not separate. So what we want to do then is to help the girls that we work with see that sex isn't what leads to intimacy and love, but actually it's commitment, it's faithfulness, it's marriage that leads to sex. That's the place that the gift of sex is best for. Now that is radically countercultural. You know, we live in a culture that says actually it's casual, just have sex with whoever you want, as long as you're consenting, that's fine. And we're all for consent, aren't we? We're all for people thinking for themselves. But actually, as Christians, as disciples of Jesus, we want to be seeing sex in the way that God has created it, as a gift for mutual faithfulness. And let me tell you how this kind of worked out for me recently. I was part of a group where we were discussing what needs to be taught in SRE lessons in schools. And so there are lots of different voices, different communities, and I was there representing one of the voices representing the Christian community. And afterwards, somebody said to me, oh, you know, you Christians, you're just obsessed with sexual abstinence. Like, if there's any talk about sex anywhere, there's going to be a Christian saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing it. Like, you're just obsessed about people not having sex. Well, I stopped and thought for a while and thought, actually, if that's the message that people are hearing from the Christian community, that's really inadequate, isn't it? So I said to her, actually, I'm really sorry that's what you've heard all the time, because really, we're not obsessed with sexual abstinence, we're obsessed with sexual faithfulness. I took her to that passage in Mark's Gospel. I said, we believe that sex has the potential to make two one. We believe there's something about that that's kind of binding for life. We know that marriages break down. We know that all sorts of painful things happen. But for us, actually, sex is not casual. It's something incredibly high that we value. And she was quite taken aback. And I think that's really what we want to be saying with our girls, is give them a vision of God's wonderful gift of sex, which means it's possible to have wonderful friendships and relationships that stop short of sex. It's possible to get to know somebody outside of marriage, and for you not to be sexually active. That is possible in today's culture. So we want to be kind of unpacking that a bit with the girls. So I hope as you turn to this passage and you chat as a team and you think and pray for yourself, wouldn't it be great if we could give this next generation of girls growing up the confidence to turn to Scripture and to know that actually God has got good news for them about their sexuality, about sexual desires and about relationships.